She arrived to celebrate her cousin's perfect life, but before the night ended, everything would shangeth. Night, everyone came to celebrate one woman's future. Another woman's entire life was about to fall apart, not because she made a mistake, not because she lost something, but because a secret hidden for more than 20 years was waiting inside that ballroom, a secret that would turn admiration into shock, pride into regret, and family into strangers. By sunrise, the daughter nobody valued would walk away with something money could never buy, while the people who ignored her would desperately wish they could take back every word they had ever spoken. But at the beginning of that night, Chimaka knew none of this. She only knew she was already dreading the party, the celebration. The Grand Sapphire Hotel sparkled across the city, skyline like a palace. Luxury vehicles filled the parking lot, camera flashes lit up the entrance every few seconds. Inside, crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling while soft music floated through the elegant ballroom. Guests laughed, business executives exchanged handshakes, women in expensive gowns gathered around tables decorated with fresh flowers and golden candles. Everything had been designed to celebrate one person, Amara Okafor, the family's golden child, the woman everyone admired, the woman who never seemed to make mistakes. Tonight was her engagement party, and the entire room revolved around her. Near the center stage, Amara stood beside her wealthy fiancé, smiling as photographers captured picture after picture. Her diamond ring sparkled beneath the lights. Every guest wanted a chance to congratulate her. Every conversation somehow returned to her success. She's always been exceptional, such a beautiful couple. Her future is brighter than ever. Her mother, Patricia, glowed with pride as she showed the ring to anyone willing to look. Her father, Emmanuel, stood nearby, discussing business opportunities with important guests. For them, tonight felt perfect, complete, like proof that all their dreams had come true. Meanwhile, across town, another daughter stared silently at her reflection. The other daughter, Kiamakaka, sat on the edge of her bed. The invitation rested beside her. She had spent nearly an hour deciding whether she should even attend. Her phone vibrated again. A message from her mother. Please, don't embarrass us by arriving late. A second message followed immediately. And try to look confident tonight. Chimaka laughed bitterly. Confident? That was easy to ask for when you weren't constantly being compared to someone else. She already knew exactly how the evening would unfold. Someone would ask why she wasn't married yet. Someone would mention Amara's accomplishments. Someone would remind her how successful her cousin had become. And then they would give her that look, the one she hated most, the look filled with disappointment disguised as concern, the look that silently asked, "What happened to you?" Growing up, she and Amara had been inseparable. At least that's what people believed. The truth was different. As children, whenever relatives visited, they praised Amara's intelligence, praised her beauty, praised her confidence, praised her achievements, and when they looked at Chimaka, they always seemed to be searching for something positive to say. Over the years, those small moments had become invisible scars, scars nobody else noticed, but Chimaka carried them everywhere. Tonight would be no different, or so she thought. Arriving at the part wine, Chimaka finally entered the hotel ballroom. Conversations continued without interruption. No photographers rushed toward her. No guests turned excitedly. No one even noticed. For a brief moment, she considered leaving. Then her mother's voice stopped her. "There you are." Her mother approached quickly. Her eyes scanned Chimaka's outfit before offering a forced smile. "You could have put a little more effort into your appearance. Not hello. Not, how are you? Just criticism. As usual." Chimaka swallowed her response. "Good evening to you too, Mom." Her mother ignored the comment. "Go congratulate Amara." Then she walked away. Chimaka watched her disappear into the crowd. Somehow, despite being surrounded by hundreds of people, she felt completely alone. The strange old mana. Few minutes later, while standing near one of the side tables, Chimaka noticed someone unusual. An elderly man sat alone in the corner. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't drinking champagne, he wasn't socializing, he wasn't smiling. He simply watched the room quietly. There was something strange about him, not his appearance, his expression. As though he were searching for someone. As though he had been waiting years for this exact night. Eventually, his eyes settled on Chimaka and stayed there. She felt uncomfortable immediately. Then, surprisingly, the old man smiled, not the polite smile guests exchanged all evening. A different smile, a sad smile, a familiar smile. As though he knew her. But that was impossible. She had never seen him before, or had she? For reasons she couldn't explain, a strange feeling stirred deep inside her chest. The man slowly stood up, then began walking toward her. The moment everything changed. The music continued. Guests laughed. Champagne glasses clinked together. Nobody paid attention to the elderly man crossing the ballroom. Nobody, except Chimaka. Her heartbeat quickened, step by step. He moved closer, until finally he stopped directly in front of her. For several seconds, he simply stared at her face, his eyes filled with emotion. Then his voice trembled. After all these years, Chimaka frowned. "Excuse me?" The old man's hands shook, tears gathered in his eyes, and then he spoke words that instantly made her blood run cold, words that would stop the entire celebration, words that would expose a secret hidden for more than 2 decades, words that would change everything she believed about her family. "I finally found my granddaughter." The room was still celebrating. Nobody yet realized that within minutes, the engagement party would become the scene of a family disaster, and Chimaka was standing at the center of it. Part 2. The silence felt endless. Hundreds of eyes moved back and forth between Solomon and Chimaka. Nobody understood what was happening. Nobody except Solomon, and he wasn't explaining anything. Not yet. Chimaka stood frozen beside the window, still holding the champagne glass she had forgotten to put down. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear herself think. Solomon Kwaku, one of the most powerful businessmen on the continent, standing directly in front of her, looking at her as if she mattered more than anyone else in the room, including the bride-to-be, including the wealthy guests, including the hosts themselves. "I've been looking for you," he repeated. The words echoed through the ballroom. A nervous laugh escaped from somewhere in the crowd. People began whispering immediately. Does he know her? How is that possible? Who is she to him? Near the stage, Amara's smile had completely disappeared. Her mother and father exchanged confused glances. For the first time that night, nobody was paying attention to them. The spotlight had moved, and they hated it. Chimaka finally found her voice. "I'm sorry," she swallowed. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." A few guests nodded. That explanation made sense. It had to be a mistake. Solomon smiled. No, his answer came instantly. No mistake. The confidence in his voice made the room even quieter. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. The crowd watched carefully. He removed a small black envelope. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic, just a simple envelope. Yet the way he held it made it seem incredibly important. "I was asked to give this to you personally." Chimaka stared at it. "By who?" For the first time, Solomon's expression became emotional, almost sad. "By a man who believed in you before anyone else did." A strange chill ran through her body. She didn't understand why, but something about those words felt personal, deeply personal. As if they touched a wound she had carried her entire life. The ballroom remained silent as she slowly accepted the envelope. Her hands trembled slightly. Inside was a folded letter. Nothing more, just a letter. But the moment she saw the handwriting, her stomach dropped, because she recognized it, or at least she thought she did. Impossible, absolutely impossible. She unfolded the paper. The first line stole the air from her lungs. "My dear Chimaka." Her vision blurred. Nobody in the room understood why her face had suddenly changed. Nobody knew why tears immediately appeared in her eyes. Solomon remained silent, giving her time, giving her space. The guests could only watch. The letter continued. "If you are reading this, it means I was unable to tell you the truth myself." Chimaka's hands shook harder. Every word felt heavier than the last. "You spent your life believing you were less important than others. You spent years wondering why you never seemed to belong. And for that, I am deeply sorry." The room watched her read. Every second increased the tension. Every second made the mystery deeper. Her father finally stepped forward. "What is this?" His voice sounded irritated. not concerned. Irritated. As though the attention being given to his daughter somehow offended him, Solomon turned slowly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. His calm expression vanished, and suddenly everyone understood why powerful people feared him. You'll have your answers soon. The authority in his voice stopped Dealey in his tracks. Nobody spoke after that. Nobody dared. Meanwhile, Chimaka continued reading. Then she reached the final paragraph, and everything changed. The letter ended with a sentence she never expected to see. A sentence that shattered her understanding of her entire life. A sentence that explained years of feeling different, years of feeling unwanted, years of never belonging. The sentence read, "You were never supposed to grow up believing you were ordinary, because the company everyone celebrates today was built from the software you created." Tears streamed down her face. The ballroom erupted with confusion. Nobody understood. Not yet, but Solomon did, and so did Chimaka. For years, she had secretly developed the technology that transformed a struggling startup into one of Africa's fastest-growing companies, a company now worth hundreds of millions. A company whose success had made countless investors wealthy, a company Solomon had personally invested in, yet because of legal agreements and confidential contracts, nobody knew her role. Nobody. Not her family, not her relatives, not even her closest friends. The same people who mocked her for working on computers all day had no idea they were standing in front of the architect of a business empire. The room slowly began to realize something was very wrong, or perhaps, very right. Solomon looked around the ballroom. His gaze moved from guest to guest, then finally settled on Chimaka's parents. "I've spent 3 years trying to convince her to accept public recognition." He paused. 3 years. The silence became unbearable, but she always refused. Gasps spread through the crowd. 3 years? Recognition? What recognition? What was happening? Solomon smiled proudly, then delivered the sentence that would haunt her parents forever. "The woman you spent tonight humiliating is worth more than everyone in this ballroom combined." The room exploded. Shock, disbelief, confusion. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew what to think. And standing at the center of it all was Chimaka, the daughter nobody valued, the daughter nobody defended, the daughter everyone underestimated. For the first time in her life, the entire room was finally seeing her, and this was only the beginning. End of part 2, because the next revelation would be even more devastating. The truth about who hid her success, and why her own family never wanted her to shine. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath the rooftop. For the first time that night, Chidera felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not because people finally respected her. Not because the guests suddenly admired her. And certainly not because her parents were now desperately trying to claim credit for her success. No, the peace came from something much simpler. The truth no longer needed her protection. Everyone had finally seen what she had spent years becoming, and nothing could take that away. Beside her, Solomon stood quietly watching the skyline. "The funny thing about success," he said after a while, "is that the people who ignore your struggle always want front row seats to your victory." Chidera smiled softly. The words felt painfully accurate. Her phone vibrated. Again, and again, and again. 23 missed calls, 9 messages from her mother, 4 from her father, several from relatives who hadn't spoken to her in years. The same people who spent most of the evening pretending she barely existed. Now, suddenly they couldn't stop reaching out. She locked the screen without reading a single message. Tonight wasn't about them. For once, it was about her. But the night wasn't finished yet. Not even close, because across the rooftop, another person was struggling to accept what had happened. Tamalade, the woman who had spent her entire life being the center of attention, the woman who had never experienced being overshadowed. She stood alone, near the glass railing, staring into her untouched drink. Her engagement party had become someone else's story. Her celebration had become someone else's victory, and she wasn't handling it well. Musa approached her carefully. "You should talk to your sister." Tamalade laughed bitterly. "My sister?" She shook her head. "You mean the genius billionaire everyone suddenly worships?" Musa frowned. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Her voice cracked slightly. For the first time all night, genuine emotion appeared on her face. "I spent months planning this engagement," she looked toward the crowd. Almost everyone was still talking about Chidera, still discussing her achievements, still replaying Solomon's announcement. My entire life, Temelade whispered. People looked at me the way they're looking at her now. Musa stayed silent, because deep down, he knew she was right, and that realization terrified her. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the rooftop, several investors had gathered around Solomon. One of them spoke carefully. Are the rumors true? Solomon smiled. Which rumors? The valuation. The group exchanged nervous glances. Then, the investor continued. The reports say Chidera owns a significant percentage of the company. Chidera looked up. She had never cared much about numbers. Money had never been her motivation. But Solomon's answer nearly made everyone choke on their drinks. The reports are outdated. The investors froze. Outdated? Solomon nodded. Her shares increased last quarter. Silence. The businessman swallowed hard. What is her stake worth now? Solomon looked directly at Chidera, then answered, calmly, just over $180 million. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody spoke. The rooftop became completely silent. $180 million. The number felt unreal. Some guests thought they had heard wrong. Others assumed he was joking. But Solomon wasn't smiling, which meant he was serious, very serious. Across the rooftop, Dealey nearly dropped his glass. Gozi grabbed the railing for support. Temelade's face turned completely pale. $180 million. The daughter they called a disappointment. The daughter they mocked in front of strangers. The daughter they treated like a burden was worth more than their entire extended family combined, and suddenly every cruel comment came rushing back. Every insult, every comparison, every moment they chose not to listen, because now they understood something devastating. The problem had never been Chidera. The problem was them. Later that evening, as guests slowly began leaving, Dealey finally found the courage to approach his daughter again. This time there were no cameras.no audience.no guests, just a father and a daughter. For several seconds he struggled to speak. Then finally the words came out. I'm sorry. Chidera looked at him quietly, not angry, not emotional, just tired. Dealey's eyes filled with regret. I thought I was helping you by pushing you. No, her answer was gentle. You were trying to turn me into someone else. The words hit harder than any accusation, because they were true. For years he had measured her against someone she was never supposed to become, and in doing so, he never bothered learning who she actually was. A tear rolled down Gozi's face. We didn't know. Chidera looked at her mother, then smiled sadly. That's exactly the problem. The silence that followed felt endless. Years of pain lived inside those few words. Years of being unseen. Years of being unheard. Years of being loved conditionally. Eventually, Chidera took a step backward, then another, and another. Not dramatically, not angrily, just calmly, like someone finally walking away from a door she had spent years knocking on. Solomon waited near the elevator. The helicopter that would take them to the airport was already preparing for departure. A new project, a new country, a new chapter. As Chidera reached the elevator, she turned one final time. Her parents stood together, broken, regretful, silent. Temelade stood several feet away, unable to meet her eyes, and suddenly Chidera realized something important. She didn't hate them, not anymore. Hate requires energy, and she was finally done carrying that weight. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. Solomon followed. The doors slowly began to close, and just before they shut completely, Chidera spoke her final words of the night, words nobody there would ever forget. You spent years asking why I wasn't like her. A pause, then she smiled. You never stopped to ask why I needed to be. The doors closed, and for the first time in her life, nobody had an answer. End of part 3. But thousands of miles away, waiting inside a locked office in Nairobi, was a document containing a secret about Chidera's company ownership, a secret so shocking that even Solomon didn't know it existed. And when that document surfaced, it would change everything once again.